Week 14 starts tonight, and here's 5 quarterbacks. I'm going to start here in Week 14. The first guy's Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. Herbert coming off a horrible ball game versus the New England Patriots, where he just couldn't get anything going in Week 13. 209 yards and 2 windows. It seemed like he had no time in that game. He couldn't get the ball to his guys, and that was his worst game in his career and obviously in fantasy. But this week, I think it's a bounce-back game for Herbert. He versus the Atlanta Falcons that give up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And Herbert, I got him ranked 9th overall this week on my quarterback rankings, so check that video out if you haven't. But Herbert, I think this week he has a pretty good game. I don't think he's going to have an explosive game like he had. I think 25-30 fantasy points at most Herbert gets, and if you have him, you obviously start him this week. The second guy was staying in the same games, Matt Ryan of the Atlanta Falcons. Ryan last week, he got off to a slow start for the Falcons in that ball game versus the New Orleans Saints, but he finished with 19 fantasy points, 273 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and a fumble loss, and that's concerning. He only threw for 1 touchdown in that game, but this week, like I said, it's a better matchup for Ryan and the Falcons. They're indoors again, at least in Los Angeles, and the Chargers give up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So Ryan, he got Julio Jones back last week. He went for 96 yards. Calvin Ridley, he went over 100, but just the running game was inconsistent, and I think New Orleans knew that Atlanta, they were just going to throw the ball the whole time. So this week, I think things will be different. I think Ryan, he could have a good ball game here, and I could even see this being a mini shootout over there in Los Angeles. So I like Matt Ryan as the second starter. The third guy, Phillip Rivers of the Indianapolis Colts. Rivers once again went over 20 fantasy points last week in a matchup versus the Houston Texans. And this week he's got a pretty good matchup versus the Vegas Raiders that give up the 12th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And this week I know Rivers, he's been banged up a little with the injury, but I think he's going to play. It's just a toe injury. This guy, he's played through torn ACLs and stuff over the years, and this week it's a good matchup. Like I said, we saw Sam Darnold have a big ball game versus Vegas, so why can't Rivers? I could see Rivers going for 280 to 300 yards with 2 or 3 touchdowns and an into in this one, and I think it's a pretty easy start this week if you don't have any other options to go out there and just start Rivers. The fourth quarterback is Tom Brady of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brady went on bye last week, and this week I think he's going to come out firing, and him and his teammates are going to have a good game, the Bucs versus the Minnesota Vikings. This is a big game for the Bucs. They're coming off of 2 bad losses now, and they need this one bad. Maybe they regrouped over the bye week, and Brady, he's been pretty good, except for 2 or 3 fantasy games this year. But Brady, in his last 2 out of 3 games, he's gone over 30 fantasy points. So this week I could see him hit that 30-point threshold, and then he's got 2 layup matchups at Atlanta and at Detroit after this. So Brady, I like him as the 4th starter. And the 5th and final starter is Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. Last week the Titans, they were down big time way early in the game. But Tannehill and the offense, they tried getting their team back in the game. And Tannehill, he had a great fantasy day. 389 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and into, and he got a 2-point conversion. So he finished the ball game with 39 fantasy points. I don't know if he'll be that good this week versus Jacksonville, because if they got a lead, you know Derrick Henry's going to run it down. But I think Tannehill this week, 25 to 30 fantasy points is definitely in the range. Jacksonville gives up the 4th most fantasy points on the season, and Tannehill on the week, I got him ranked as the number 5 quarterback. So that's 5 quarterbacks I'm going to start here heading into week 14.